Does anybody here remember how big of a deal this game right here was? Super Mario 64's handheld remake with the debut of the Nintendo DS, the first handheld console from Nintendo that used two screens and incorporated the touchscreen mechanic. It was a massive deal and I still remember it. In fact, I still play through this game every so often. Start a new file, play through everything, because it's one of my favorite games, right along with Ocarina of Time 3D on the 3DS. If you haven't noticed or haven't been able to guess yet, here is what this month's Retro Hardware Review is going to be on. So, without further ado, here is my review of the original model of the Nintendo Dual Screen, otherwise known as the Nintendo DS. Alright, first thing we need to look at in a hardware review is the design. We've got our basic clamshell design here, a little similar to how the 3DS works, but it was a little different. If you notice, the piece with the screen that's attached to the hinge is not exactly attached to the back of the device, it's just kind of sitting on top. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that's how the hinge worked in the original model. There's not a whole lot to interact with when the system is closed, other than the top and the bottom of the system. On the top of the system, we have L and R triggers. This is the charging port that you use to charge the battery. It uses the same port and cable that the Game Boy Advance SP used. We got this little hole here. This hole is for the stylus pen. And this is the cartridge slot for Nintendo DS games. As you can see, I have Super Mario 64 DS in the cartridge slot. This back here used to be product information. I've used this so much that it's pretty much gone now. On the bottom, this right here is a volume slider. Over here we've got our audio jack, and we've also got a little extra jack right here so you can plug in a headset, because the Nintendo DS does have a microphone built into it. And my favorite part right here is another cartridge slot. On the original DS, you had cartridge slots for true backwards compatibility with the Game Boy Advance. And yes, you're looking at this correctly. This is Doom 2 for the Game Boy Advance. Now, let's open it up and take a look at the inside of the device. This area right here, as I said before, sits on top of the rest of the system. We've got our main display screen right here, and we've got two particularly large speakers allowing for Nintendo's very first stereo audio handheld with speakers. Then we got the bottom. We got our touch screen right here, which functions just like the touchscreen on the 3DS and the 2DS. This is our power button to turn the system on and off. We've got our D-pad. The Nintendo DS didn't have any form of analog stick or analog pad like the 3DS does. Our start and select buttons are here. We've got our A, B, X, and Y face buttons here. On the very bottom, this where my right thumb is right now, these are the power indicator lights to let you know when the system's on, when the battery's running low, when it's charging, and this is the microphone. As you may not be aware, a few DS games actually use the microphone, like the DS port of the first Resident Evil game. You use the microphone during the CPR minigame. Now, other than the design, let's take a look at the actual operating system of the Nintendo DS. When you turn it on, most of the operating system is on the bottom screen. First, we'll look at the top screen. We've got a clock, we've got a calendar, we've got our battery information. Not a whole lot to see here. And on the bottom screen, the top and the bottom bars are for games that are in the cartridge slots. For example, the top is for Nintendo DS games, and the bottom is for Game Boy Advance games. Forgive me for constantly zooming the system out. The nasty color shading of the camera that you saw in one of my past reviews happens here, and if I pull it out, it returns to normal. Then, these two other options in the middle, Pictochat and DS Download Play. Pictochat was like a little messaging or sketching app that you could use ad hoc connections with another person nearby with another Nintendo DS. I actually did this a lot back when I was in high school. And DS Download Play is something that 3DS fans will probably be familiar with. You can have one person own a game and have their cartridge in one DS, and the second DS nearby with an ad hoc connection would be able to play multiplayer with the other person even though they didn't own a copy of the game. And there's not really much else to say. This right down here turns the backlight on and off, and this down here lets you change for alarm clock settings. So that's about all I want to say for the design. So let's go on to performance. I do have some nitpicks here. First, we're going to talk about the design of the original model. Nintendo rectified these flaws with the later models like the Nintendo DSi, but the first DS had a very flimsy hinge system. As you can see, it just kind of sits on here. And as you may not have already noticed from me moving the system, yeah, that's broken. That actually happened within about a month of owning the system, and I've seen countless stories online of the same thing happening to others. This was a huge design flaw. The Nintendo DS original model was big and bulky, but the hinge was just flimsy. A lot more flimsy than the later models of the DS, and even the Game Boy Advance SP that it got the idea from. Just a big flimsy design. The next thing I will, for all intents and purposes, complain about, screen quality. The screen, I'll be honest, the screen quality isn't that great. There's a lot of pixelization, there's a lot of degradation that you can see, and that's not just because this is one of the original DSs that came out. Back when they first came out, and I played this system, I saw the same thing. If you own a Sega Game Gear, the quality of the screen is about the same. So, of course, I'm going to show you a 2D game so it doesn't look as bad. But that's the next thing that I had a major problem with. And I do have a third thing I had a problem with. Let's turn that volume down. The third thing I had a problem with was the lack of a home button and the way you have to change your cartridges. If you're in the middle of a game, chainsawing through some enemies in Doom 2, or running through a level in Super Mario 64 DS, and you want to change your games, there is no home button for you to just go back to the home screen, pop the cartridge out, and put another one in. You have to do this. Completely power off the system. Completely turn it off. Turn it back on. And then switch to the other game you want to play. There's another problem. The system doesn't have very good software for recognizing when you take cartridges out and put them back in like 3DS does. When you take a cartridge out, the system kind of just freezes on you. I just took Super Mario 64 DS and now I can't do anything on this system. So, once again, completely turn it off, turn it back on. Typical tech support issue. Coming from me, someone who has worked tech support. And there, it's finally updated. That is something that I really don't like about the system. Having to completely turn it off to be able to switch stuff like this. Even the PSP didn't have this kind of problem. So, in conclusion, the Nintendo DS was a good system. I loved it, and it's arguably one of the best-selling systems in history. However, the original model had some flaws with the flimsy hinge design, screen quality, and the fact that you have to power off the device whenever you remove cartridges or just want to go back to the home screen to do Pictochat or start another game. Reviews to Go rates the original Nintendo DS a 7 out of 10. If you'd like to comment on this further, feel free to below or head to my site at www.reviewstogo.com. I may not be able to reply to any comments and questions right away this weekend. Friday and Saturday, I am going to be gone at Sparta, Kentucky at Import Alliance Summer Meet. If you're there, then feel free to give me a tweet and you can pop by my car to see the Reviews to Go logo and pick up some flyers.